Today we're going to talk about depression and grief. I often call these two emotions the evil twins of caregiving because the symptoms are so similar that it can be really difficult to distinguish one from the other. It's not unusual for caregivers to experience anger and frustration, overwhelming feelings of guilt, lack of energy, headaches, backaches, digestive disorders, difficulty sleeping, weight loss or gain, tension, anxiety disorders, including panic attacks, an inability to view the situation realistically, and an overwhelming sense of loss and longing for what was and will never be again. You feel like there is a dark cloud hovering right above your head and it's following you wherever you go. It is awful. And all of these symptoms of depression and grief can be experienced simultaneously. And when you are going through it, you will be challenged physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And in addition to all of these terrible symptoms, some people are also challenged by outdated beliefs and misinformation about depression and grief. For example, years ago, I told my then 87-year-old Aunt Jean that I was writing an article about older people and depression. I told her I would treat her to lunch if she would share her thoughts with me. Well, she happily agreed. I picked her up and we drove to the restaurant, and after we ordered, I took out my pad and pen and I said, "So, Jean, I would like to know your thoughts about older people and depression." She shrugged and said, "We don't talk about it." I thought, well, that's interesting. Then I asked, "Well, just between the two of us, do you think maybe you have ever been depressed?" "Me? No. I said, "Okay, well, let me ask you this. Did your parents, my grandparents, ever say or do anything that make you think that they might have been depressed?" "Never." "Oh," I said, "okay, well, how about your friends? I know a lot of them have lost their spouses and some of them have some health conditions and have any of them ever said anything that would make you think they might be depressed?" And her answer was, "Absolutely not." And I said, "Well, do you think it's possible that they were, but they just never talked about it?" She said, "I don't know, maybe. But depression just isn't something you talk about with other people." Well, by this time, I'm thinking Jean isn't going to be any help at all. She just wanted a free lunch. But after taking a few bites of her salad, she looked a little thoughtful and she said, "You know, during World War II, when I was a senior in high school, we lived in Ellenwood, Kansas. And there was one week in 1942 or 43 when 3 women committed suicide." And I said, 3 women? Oh my goodness, Jean, why? What in the world was going on in a town of fewer than 300 people that would make 3 women commit suicide in the same week? And Jean shrugged and said, "I don't know. No one ever talked about it." And that was my aha moment. My Aunt Jean was a member of the silent generation. And that is people who were born between 1925 and 1945. Many of them were children during the Great Depression. Everyone was poor. Everyone was doing without. Everyone struggled, and you did not whine or complain. You just pulled yourself up out of bed every morning and you got to work doing whatever had to be done to survive. And then, when Pearl Harbor was bombed in 1941, all of America went to war. Every man, woman, and child was expected to make personal sacrifices and contribute to the good of the country as a whole. They took the slogan, "Loose lips sink ships," very, very seriously. Everyone knew that keeping secrets saved lives. The time and the culture in which they were raised made them pragmatic, stoic people who respected hard work and commitment. They were ambitious, goal-oriented. They valued strength, integrity, and independence. Now, my dad was a member of the greatest generation, and he believed that people who got depressed were just feeling sorry for themselves. and self-pity was a weakness. And to him, weak equaled worthless. Now, this doesn't mean that the people from the greatest generation or the silent generation didn't get depressed. They did. They just didn't talk about it. And we have to remember that they didn't grow up with reality TV, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or TikTok. And the very idea of publicly sharing anything about their finances, their feelings, or their love lives, for crying out loud, on a social media website would be horrifying to them. Thankfully, we have made a lot of progress diagnosing and treating depression and other types of mental illnesses in the last few decades. But we still have a long way to go. So if you are the child or a grandchild of someone who is a member of the greatest generation, the silent generation, or even a baby boomer, you might need to check to see if the understanding and attitudes your parents and grandparents attached to depression might have filtered down to you. If so, it may take a conscious effort on your part to release any outdated beliefs that depression is something that we shouldn't admit to or seek help to overcome.